Okay, then we're on, thank you. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the Communities Housing and Environment Committee, 18th of June. Welcome to all members, officers and members of the public. I've been advised that there'll be no fire drills planned for this evening, but if the alarm does sound, Mrs Matthews will assess the situation and provide further details on the evacuation of the building if necessary. I would remind you that this meeting will be broadcast live and recorded for playback on the Maidstone Borough Council website. But will anyone else be recording or filming the proceedings? No? Okay, thank you. I ask that people at the meeting know if this is happening. Members who are using mobile phones or tablets are asked to switch them silent this evening, and they should only be used with regard to business on the agenda. There is some important bits going on in London this evening, but I don't think members would be much interested in that. So, might be a few butlers and chauffeurs interested, but okay. Just like to say that to the members, we've got Caroline this year as our clerk, and from Mike of last year. Good evening to Mrs Young, Councillor Young, welcome, and Councillor Kahada. Good evening, thank you very much. And just a quick one, as you're probably aware, we've now got Parks and Open Spaces on this committee after the review. So coming up, we plan an outing basically to do some visits on what we actually have in the borough on our Parks and Open Spaces. So when we're determining and discussing items here, we will actually be able to know what we're talking about. Thank you. So I'll go on to apologies for absence, please.
Oh, I've done it now. Oh dear.
Okay, I'll read out the apologies while we're getting the microphones sorted out. We have apologies from Councillor Joy and Councillor M. Rose. And can I have notification of substitute members, please? Thank you very much. There's two urgent items this evening on the key performance indicators, Q4 update, updated figures of recycling rates and recommendations for the graffiti, the KPIs. We plan to take the update on the KPI with the graffiti item at the end, so it's not a separate one. Okay, thank you. Notification of visiting members, please. I can see one there. Could you kindly come to the microphone, Councillor Hinder, and tell us what you're here for, please?
Thank you, Chair. Here for item 10, presentation of the petition, and I would like to speak on that one, please.
Certainly, thank you very much. Disclosures by members and officers. Do we have any? No, thank you. Disclosures of lobbying. Yep. I shall be disclosing that I've been lobbied on Heather House, and Councillor Burton, Councillor Rose, Councillor Carter, Councillor Robertson, Councillor Powell. All right, welcome, Councillor Powell. Get your breath back. I move that there are no exempt items on the agenda this evening, so everything will be proposed in public. Is that agreed? Yeah, thank you. So we'll go to the minutes of the meeting of the 16th of April, which is on pages 1 to 6, agenda item 8. I'll go through them page by page. Page 1, page 2, page 3, 4, 5, and 6. Everybody happy? Is that agreed, everybody? Yeah, thank you very much. And then the minutes on the 21st of May, which are on page 7. Is that all okay with everybody? Is that agreed? Lovely, thank you very much. And then now we go on to a presentation of petitions. We do have a petition tonight on Village Green status for Weathering Heath. Mr. Clark, I understand you're presenting the petition. Would you kindly come forward to the speakers table? If you press the button in the middle, the light should come on, and you have 5 minutes. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Chairman, councillors and members of the committee, thank you for this opportunity to address the committee and present the petition for Weathering Heath.
Mr. Clark, sorry, we're going to stop you just for a second because we've got technical issues. Thank you.
Present it, so present this. So I'll present. Because if that's all there, because obviously Jen and John know
They will.
the details behind it, so I won't need to say, but I won't other than to say it'll be discussed.
Yes.
Testing, testing. That sounds better.
Okay, can you hear me? Yeah. Okay, Mr. Clark, very sorry, I do apologise about that. I think we're okay now. Thank you.
We, the undersigned, petition the council to request that Kent County Council change the status of Weathering Heath to that of a designated village green. Village green status for Weathering Heath will ensure that the site remains a green space and continues to be enjoyed by present and future generations. 230 people signed this e-petition, which ran from the 25th of March to the 5th of June this year. Historically, the land, which is now Weathering Heath, formed part of the Watman estate for 150 years until it was sold for development in 1954, and subsequently transferred by wards to Maidstone Borough Council on the 31st of July 82 to be used as a public open space for a period of 80 years. Weavering Heath has always been a green space and consists an area of mown grass incorporating a trim trail with exercise and activity structures, areas of woodland, some ancient woodland, walking trails, areas of long grass and dense undergrowth to protect the local wildlife. The northwest corner of the heath, bordered by the Gids Pond watercourse, has particular interest as it contains the protected common lizard, a variety of heather, which is the only remaining site in the Maidstone area, and also bird's foot, which is one of only 44 known sites in Kent. Regular use of the heath includes a local community of very sociable dog walkers, community and local street picnics. The next picnic is actually Sunday the 30th of June. The trim trail, which people use for exercise and plenty of walking, not just the dog walkers, but locals use this as well to take in the views or just try and achieve their daily 10,000 step target. It's a space for local youngsters to meet and mingle, with informal games of football and rounders being played pretty much all year round, using the metal kickabout wall and goal that the council provided some years ago. In addition, summer months activities include organised children's and adults football coaching, organised fitness classes, including a Sunday morning group and the Thursday evening boot camp, blackberry picking, and recently one of the residents mentioned youngsters flying a drone, all adding to the diversity of organised and informal activities on the heath, which are many and varied. I believe that we have demonstrated that the heath is used as of right as an open space for the purpose of lawful sports and pastimes by a significant number of the inhabitants of the locality and as an important focal point for health and community. On behalf of the petitioners, I request that the committee recommend that Maidstone Borough Council voluntarily dedicate Weavering Heath for public access as a town or village green under section 15(8) of the Commons Act 2006. As a final comment, at the recent public meeting to determine the planning application for Pope's Field, which is situated the other side of Bearsted Road to Weavering Heath, which is designated as local nature reserve in the local plan and subject to a section 106 agreement. In summing up, having reluctantly approved the application, the chairman, Clive English, commented that planning committee should not be placed in this position again and that areas of green space must be adequately protected. I suggest that Weavering Heath is a unique area that needs your protection and it is within your gift to apply to Kent County Council for village green status on behalf of the residents. Thank you for listening.
Thank you, Mr. Clark. Thank you. Thank you. Councillor Hinder, would you like to come forward, please?
Thank you, members, for allowing me to address you today. As you've already heard, the area of Weavering Heath was created from land comprising part of the 1980s Grow Green development. It's bordered now by modern residential properties to the southeast and east, and the historic hamlets of Gids Pond to the north and Weavering to the east. There's a network of grass footpaths which connect various parts of the heath to surrounding roads. NBC own and manage this. NBC has recently recognised a local volunteer group, the Friends of Weavering Heath and Woodlands, to undertake work on the site. Village green status does not take away the issue of ownership, which will remain with NBC. NBC does have a vision and management strategy for the site and open spaces. I'd like to bring your attention to Maidstone's Green and Blue Infrastructure Strategy, June 2016, Community Involvement and Education. It identifies that local people are best placed to help decide what is needed in their local environment. Greater community involvement in green space management has led to numerous improvements to green infrastructure across the borough, and in many cases, generating more active use of the space. It also reduces a source of conflict between people and the council or other maintenance providers in relation to the ongoing maintenance of green infrastructure. Communities tend to be particularly keen to understand, protect, and utilise their own heritage assets. This broad community appeal can really help enhance the awareness, understanding, and appreciation of the borough, its heritage and distinctive character. The problems, though, is in 2010, MBC Management Plan identified problems at the Heath with litter, as well as issues with dog fouling and small-scale vandalism. Residents have recently seen much more litter, broken glass, and barbecues being used on the site. Individuals and now volunteer groups keep the area clean. School holidays and good weather are, like all open spaces, a particular problem time. The site used to have, until the government stopped MBC using it, the status of area of local landscape importance. But now its only status is as an MBC open space. It has no protection in the local plan, and even if it did, MBC has the power to ignore or amend its local plan, and with the two recent planning applications at Popesfield, residents are acutely aware of this lack of watertight legal protection. The chairman of the planning committee openly criticised MBC's poor record for protecting land that should have been available for public use. The planning application for the two schools at Popesfield identified Weavering Heath as an area that had been investigated and rejected as a possible site for the schools, and this focused residents' views on the status of the area. In approximately 20 years, the original Weavering Heath Section 106, which requires the land to be preserved for community use, will expire. And after that day, MBC could effectively do what it wants with the land. It is recognised that Maidstone Borough Council has not indicated that it has a wish to develop Weavering Heath, but as more pressure is placed on local authorities to find land for housing, and as finances become more stretched, residents want to ensure that the future of this beautiful and precious area is fully protected. The request for village green status is not only about protecting the area from any future threat of development. For the residents, it is also about localism and community cohesion. Like many urban areas, Grove Green and Weavering is under siege from development, traffic, and life in general, and it wants to retain and improve its community identity. Local residents have identified that they want a village green and all that this status represents for a community. Residents are asking that Maidstone Borough Council once again recognises that Weavering Heath, Wents and 5 Acre Woods have such local state landscape importance that it warrants a special protection awarded by village green status. There are basically two ways in which MBC could go about this. The easy and the cheap way. MBC can put the land forward for voluntary village green status. It's a very simple form and requires no proof of 20 years of use, etc. The expensive, time-consuming and possibly less successful way would be a formal approach from a resident or a parish council to KCC backed up by sworn affidavits. I would like to finish by just leaving you with a question. Why should it be a village green? I would contend that why shouldn't it be a village green? If MBC is committed to representing its residents and to keeping this area as an open space, then why doesn't it make it a village green, as requested and supported by the residents who live in the area? Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor Hinder, and thank you, Mr Clark, for bringing this to us. If I could just say a few bits before I go any further, is that, as members are probably aware, and probably particularly the new members, we don't have a report this evening on this item, so we can't particularly debate it. However, we have got officers here, and we have, I'm sure that I've got 3 councillors down here who want to ask a question, so perhaps we can do one question, if that's okay, just succinct question, yeah, just to perhaps to, but I'm going to read out an email that was sent to Boxley Parish Council when this goes back some time, so as you've heard, this has been going on for some time. So to give things some context, I'll read it to you. It appears that the land to which you refer, which is the Weavering Heath, obviously, was transferred by Ward Homes to Maidstone Borough Council at the time of the surrounding development under the 106 agreement, to be used as public open space for a period of 80 years from the 31st of March 1982. The land therefore already has protection for a further 44 years until 2062. However, as you indicate, there is no particular designation for it in the local plan. In terms of making an application for village green status, anyone can make such an application to Kent County Council. However, it is usually residents' associations, parish councils or groups with other interested persons who make such applications. Maidstone Borough Council, as a district council, could then comment as a consultee. MBC could, in theory, make an application, but this approach would not likely to be a recommendation to the SPST committee. As you will be aware, the rules around village green status applications are complex, but in essence, an applicant has to show that the public has used the area as a right, uninterrupted for 20 years. As the land was transferred to MBC as public open space, and MBC has set it up as an amenity space with a trim trail, benches, etc. It would seem that the public hasn't used it as a right for the requisite time. MBC as a freeholder allows the public to use it. Therefore, we do not believe that an application for village green status would be successful at this particular time. However, an alternative course of action for the parish council might be to put forward a case under the upcoming review of the Maidstone Borough Council local plan to include the land as a local green space, and as such spaces have similar protection to that of green belt in planning terms. Alternatively, Boxley Parish Council in the process of considering or preparing a neighbourhood plan, and such a designation could be included in that plan. So that's I've read an extract from the email because in there's quotes, references to the NPPF sections and things like that. We couldn't get anybody from legal to come along tonight, and as we've said, it is a complex issue, but an email I received from Estelle Cunningham, our legal rep, it says that MBC received requests from the Parish Council to apply for KCC status, to register the land as village green. KCC voluntarily registered a piece of their own woodland in Walderslade as a village green, following a request by Boxley Parish Council to register a smaller part of land which fell within Boxley. KCC Estates team applied to the KCC Commons registration team to register their own land, and it all went through very easily. Section 15, in brackets 8, of the Commons Act 2006 allows an owner of land to voluntarily apply to register as a village green, and this is a very easy process. Once the application is made and these conditions are met, it is an automatic, straightforward process. I believe this previous case might be the impetus for this petition. So I'll leave that with you there. So you've sort of like got the legal side, although I've said a lot of words at the moment. But just go, would any officers like to say anything first of all, or? No, okay. I'll take questions, and I have Councillor Harper, please.
Thank you, Chair. I've as people probably know on the council, I've been instrumental in applying for a village green status at Oakwood Park playing field, so I'm very conversant with the process. And as has been explained, there's the two routes. There's the easy route, or a route where residents and community groups or parish councils can actually go. And actually that isn't such an onerous thing as it sounds. The process is designed to put people off, but as long as you can get enough affidavits from people who've used it for over 20 years, you're on potentially a strong case. And I think as a council officer, for your email suggested, that obviously this has been open space since 1982, and therefore I should think, you know, the council's own records would substantiate public usage prior to 1999. So it would be a relatively easy case, I would think, for residents if the council wasn't necessary to be proactive on this. But I just wonder if the way forward for this would be for the committee to request a report to its next meeting or its meeting after next, looking into the issue where you've got the full information, you've got your legal officers present and so on, and we've got more information about Weavering Heath itself and the background, and therefore we would be in a better position to actually take this forward. But I think at this stage it seems to me that there's a very strong case has been presented by the residents. Open space is at a premium, and it's, you know, we can't just note the petition. I think we need to take it forward, request a report to come back as soon as possible, not to go into the long grass, and then we can either make a decision to support and register it ourselves as the landowner, as you pointed out, or if not, then the residents obviously would know the alternative course of action they would need to pursue, but that would be costly to the council, not necessary to residents, if we were to oppose such an application. So I think get the report, and I would suggest that when we get it, unless there's very strong reasons why we shouldn't do that, we should look upon it favourably. I suspect we might be opening the door to lots of requests in terms of open space around the borough, but I think that's something, just the nature of where we are in the 21st century, likely to follow through. So as I say, I'd like to propose that we have a report to the next meeting of this committee, looking at the issue in detail, so that a decision can be taken.
Okay, thank you. Thank you very much. I have Councillor Powell next, please. If you could just be brief, if you could.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. No, I mean, a lot of what Councillor Harper has said, I totally agree with. I mean, this piece of land is within our gift, the gift of Maidstone Borough Council. I don't think we need to complicate anything at all, Mr. Chairman. This is a common sense issue. In fact, tonight I actually switched off after about the first 30 seconds. Please don't take that the wrong way, but I thought this is a no-brainer. Given the amount of develop in that area, that there's 2 schools, there's the additions to the hospital, that please leave that area with one piece of small kind of space, which is Weavering Heath. But as I say, I totally agree with Councillor Harper. I'll be quite happy to support any motion where we can actually protect this as a village green. Not really sure what the legals say, but I would certainly oppose whatever legals said if they was to say the opposite. But let's get this sorted out as soon as possible. If it opens up a floodgate to other green spaces within the borough, I'm delighted.
Right. Thank you. Thank you. Councillor Powell, please.
Yes, oh, there we are. I was going to sort of, before Councillor Powell got in second, what Councillor Harper was saying there in terms of could we have a report, please, so that we can progress this matter. If, though, I could answer the point that Councillor Harper raised about not using the Section 15(1) route, that was actually covered, I believe, in the statement that Boxley Parish Council put in, which the Chairman read out. The criteria in the Act is not that it's been used for 20 years, but it's been used as of right. And I think the point that Boxley Parish Council made is that it hasn't been used as of right, it's been used because NBC have provided it under the Section 106 agreement. And I believe that is the rationale for why we need the petition, or why the petition is correct that we need NBC to make this application.
Thank you. Councillor Burton. And Councillor Burton will be the last speaker, please.
There we go. Right, okay, we're live. Sorry about the complications, everyone. I wholeheartedly agree with the suggestion for the way forward, and we'll be supporting a report coming back. I would just like to make one quite important point that I do think it's a real shame that we couldn't have had some sort of supporting report along with this. It doesn't instill great faith, I don't think, in the members of the public who have been so good as to give up their time and to put their signatures to something that they believe in, when we're actually only able to turn around and say to them, come back next time, we'll have our ducks in a row. There's a reason why we have a deadline for petitions, and it's so that we can do exactly that. So that's thoroughly disappointing, but I think there's actually quite a lot of agreement and nodding going around the room that we can see the rationale behind what the people who've put their signatures to this are saying. I do also think we need to be quite tight on when we expect this report to come back. Because I did a little bit of reading around the particular acts that have been discussed this evening, and in 2006 there was an update to said act that actually said that such petitions for village green status have to be suspended altogether if you're in a process of potentially determining a planning application. Now, I'm not saying we're anywhere near that at the moment, but were this report to be somewhere way down our committee work programme, and we were to find ourselves in that scenario, then frankly we've missed the boat because we couldn't get our ducks in a row for this meeting. So I think we need to be quite explicit in saying, you know, if not the next committee cycle, the next cycle next month, then, you know, within 2 months we'd like to see this back. So I'll formally propose that as an amendment to Councillor Harper's motion, that we say within 2 months.
Yeah, Mr. Connell would like to say something.
Thank you, Chairman. Just in terms of the next steps, we don't have the legal team here this evening, and fully appreciate the desire to see the report come back. I'm not absolutely sure that it should be this committee, because obviously we might be sort of into that sort of territory where the council wears two hats, so to speak, and it could be with that property hat on, and that would be the Policy and Resources Committee, or indeed there's the planning angle as well, and so it could be the Strategic Planning and Infrastructure Committee, or indeed this one. So I haven't had that legal advice yet, but you know, the kind of direction of travel is understood, and obviously I'll work with the chairman and agree the appropriate committee of the three that this be progressed through. But I think that is the conundrum. It's, you know, with what hat is the council making the decision, and it might be that one committee has to go first and then another sort of act upon that.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, thank you. Thank you for your input, members. And personal point of view is that Councillor Pell.
Sorry, Derek. Councillor Mortimer. Just on the observation. What we've got to be very careful is if we're going to have petitions brought to this committee, when in fact what we're stating it is the wrong committee. So either it comes to this committee, or it goes to Policy and Resources, or it wouldn't go to planning because there's no planning application, or SPST. But we've got to make sure that the petitions are heard by the correct committee. Okay, if that was the case, what we could do is we could recommend by vote on this committee that it is taken to Policy and Resources. Councillor Burton.
Councillor Burton.
If I may then, Chairman, to move this forward, bring this to a vote, conclude it, I'd like to propose a motion, an amendment to Councillor Harper's motion to say that we request a report be brought back within 2 months to the appropriate committee as deemed by the legal team. Seconder for that.
Sorry, Councillor Rose, did you want to say something just quickly? Thank you. We'd already had that. I'd already scribbled that. That's fine. Well, I was ahead of you, but I'll let you say it. You know. All right, that's lovely. Yeah, thank you. All right, thanks for your input. So yeah, we need to. So that. Do you need the wording again, folks, or are you okay? We're okay. Right. So it was proposed by Councillor Harper, seconded by Councillor Burton.
Seconded by Councillor
Councillor Powell, don't fight over it. We're moving forward. Yeah. Okay, that's fine. Okay. So is that agreed? Great, lovely. Okay, thank you very much. Thank you. And thank you very much, Boxley Parish Council members and the members of the public. Councillor Hinder, thank you. Right. Okay, we have no... I'll just wait a minute until the public leaves. It's lovely. Okay, members, we have no questions from members of the public this evening, question and answer session. So we move straight on to item 12, the community work programme, please. And Mr. Cornell, please.
Thank you, Chairman. Yep, the work programme is provided for comment. It will be developed at our next quarterly chairs meeting for beyond what's here tonight, but I'll happily take any questions in the meantime. Thank you. Thank you.
Does anybody have any questions? I'll just put one in for myself at the moment. That most members remember, there was a feasibility report, a low emission zone study that was brought. The officers received the report last week, so they're looking into it and looking into the detail, etc. So we are expecting that to come to this committee. However, I've agreed that it will go to SPI first, because it's a sort of it is a cross-cutting issue, and then it'll go from there, and then we will see it as well. At what stage that will be? So that will be going on the work programme at some stage. Councillor Harper.
Yeah, there's a couple of items which seem to be missing from the work programme at the moment, which would be the responsibility of this committee, having passed over from the old Heritage, Culture and Leisure Committee. One of which, and they're both fairly high priorities for the council, one of which is the biodiversity strategy, which we'd been promised at Heritage, Culture and Leisure Committee would be coming up for approval, I think either September or October of this year, and is missing from this, having been delayed previously. So hopefully that's just an oversight that it's not included. And the other one is to do with Maidstone Cemetery, where the current policy was to do a two-phased approach to the redevelopment and enhancement of the cemetery. Phase 1 is underway, but Phase 2 would require further review, which was the works all around the cemetery chapel, and putting in ultimately a bid and business case on the cemetery chapel to the Policy and Resources Committee to release capital funds to do that. So I assume that just because, because it's the old Chi Committee work programme, presumably it's just rolled forward, that these two items are missing as a result of that, and they will be both built in for the next version, because they are both strategic items for the council. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you. Sorry, Mrs. Shepherd.
Yes, certainly the biodiversity action plan is an oversight. It should be, there's no plan to delay that, so September, October time, as it was due to go to HCL, it will be on here. With regard to the cemetery, the proposed next step was to go to P&R to request the funding for phase 2, so that's where that would appear. Obviously we need to get underway with phase 1 to confirm the full cost of what that will be, as to whether then exactly how much we would be going to seek from P&R as additional funding. So that is still in the plan, but that's where that will go.
Okay, thank you. And just spoken to Mr. Cornell, and that's his position on the programme as well, so those items, including my one, will be included on there. So, Councillor Burton?
Thank you, Chairman. A question directly for you, I suppose, regarding the reporting that will come to us after SPI, as I believe it now is, on the low emission zone. Now, do we have any sense at this time what aspects of that we might be asked to make decisions on, how that decision process might work? Because obviously in a previous incarnation of some of our air quality strategy work. We had a joint working group with no decision-making power, but with the power to bring this together. Do we have any sense of...
Yeah, all I can say from my point of view is that there were numerous options we were looking at, all sorts of and until the report is digested and put in, let's say, priority order against cost, etc., and mitigation or whatever against air quality, we won't know where we are, which committee it's got to go to. That's all I can say. That's my point of view, and this is what we were discussing, and it only appeared last week from the consultant. So, yeah, I think that Mrs. Beattie would agree with me on that. I think is that. Yeah. All right. Thank you. Lovely. So that work programme agreed, members. Thank you. Right, we'll move on to agenda item 13, page 10 to 17, key performance indicators, quarter update, and we've got I can find an urgent update on the, yeah, on this. And this is the recycling and composting. So I'll go over to Alex, please.
Thank you, Chairman, and good evening, members. So I'll be talking you through agenda item 13, which is the key performance indicator report for quarter 4 in 2018-19. So firstly, if I may, I'd just like to go through the urgent update item that's on your tables, which includes a recommendation from Policy and Resources Committee, but as mentioned earlier, that will be discussed with the graffiti report at item 18 on the agenda, I believe it is. So I will just be covering the updated recycling stats from the urgent update. So the update of the reuse, recycling and composting tonnage data for quarter 4, as discussed at point 3.5 of the report. So as you can see, the value has decreased slightly to 47.77% for the quarter. However, the status has remained the same, and the trend from last year and last quarter is that we're still seeing an improvement. So now I'll just talk you through the report more generally. So on the whole, performance is good with 67% of targeted indicators achieving their target. Now, we had one other indicator that was within 10% of its target, and then with 2 failing to meet their targets by more than 10%. Now we have 8 indicators that have improved since last quarter. However, only 2 have improved since the same quarter last year, with performance for 7 indicators declining. Now, figures for all of the indicators, including status and trends, can be found at Appendix 1. So the 3 indicators we have relating to fly tips cleared and enforcement action taken have all seen good performance during the quarter. Now, some of these fly tips were of a particularly large volume or contained hazardous waste, which can increase response times. But despite this, we have still exceeded the target for responding within 2 and 4 working days. We've also seen the dedicated fly tipping hit squad increase our ability to deal with and enforce against fly tipping. Now, as mentioned previously, the percentage of waste that's been reused, recycled and composted has missed its target slightly. Now, typically we do see a decline during winter months due to the lower tonnage of composting material. However, performance is still good for the year at 51.4%. Now we have the second highest recycling rate in Kent, and we do continually look at strategies to improve recycling and reduce the waste contamination that we have as well. Now, the indicators which have missed their target by more than 10% were the number of applications where a prevention duty has ended as the applicant has suitable accommodation for 6 months, and also the number of households housed through the housing register. Now, for the prevention duties, changes to the Homelessness Reduction Act have resulted in major changes to the housing team. So currently previous year data isn't necessarily comparable, and we will be looking at using this as a baseline to form targets going forward for the prevention duty indicator. And for households housed through the housing register, we house 128 households through the housing register, and although this is a slight improvement on the previous quarter, we are still seeing fewer properties becoming available for our registered providers. So obviously that is having an impact on how well we can actually house people through their properties and through those affordable properties. So I'm happy to take any questions that you might have on the report or on the urgent update. Thank you.
Thank you very much for presenting that. I think, the layout of the report is nice and understandable, if I can put it like that. Councillor Rose.
Well, I'm on first try. Crikey. Thanks for that, Alex. That was really informative, as ever, when we get these reports. Just going through it, I was thinking, with the KPI of percentage of reports of littering attended to at 37.2%, and we don't have a target for that currently. Could you talk us through a bit more about what that kind of means, and also why we don't have a target for that indicator?
Mr. Edwards is going to speak in a second or two.
There we go. There, 6 times bowler counts as the magic number. Yeah, so 37. So you may look at 37 thinking, well, we're only actually attending 37% of complaints. We're not. Our schedules of work is such that we will not respond out of schedule if the work is due to be done in 3 or 4 days' time. So we won't put a knee-jerk reaction in. We'll wait until that resource comes through. So that's probably why the figure seems low, but actually we are responding to, but not as that complaint, because it's just being done as our normal scheduled works.
Okay, yeah, okay.
Well, I'll tell you what, mine's great tonight. So why, it almost seems like it's not a relevant KPI then, because if it's saying, well, why are we, so you're saying that 37% is just the percentage of the reports that you responded to but weren't already on your cycle for the next 4 days? Say, so I guess it's 4 days because that's the other KPI you have further down. Is that a relevant KPI, do you think?
It's the first year of the KPI, so it probably needs tinkering with. Maybe just purely the number of complaints is something we should be using as a KPI. But yeah, what does it mean? I wasn't quite sure how it was created, actually, Alex.
Yes, that one was originally a member's request to go in, and we did question it at the time, because I think the original intention was to understand how long between our schedule and a road falling below standard. And unfortunately, that's almost impossible to actually measure. So the intention was to actually look at how many reports do we get where actually we are having to go out of our way to clean that road and to bring it back up to standard. And so the intention, and when we first did it, we thought 50% would be actually a good figure, and we are looking for the lower the figure, the better, because actually, if our schedules are right, we shouldn't be having to respond to such complaints. So that's where it came from, which is why a percentage gives you an idea of you could go with a number, but actually, what's that a number of? You know, it would just be a number. And I think, in fairness, I think this is the second year, because the first year was just a number. Second year, we tried to do a percentage to say, okay, how much do we actually have to go above and beyond what we're already doing? And if you track that, it has come down. I think we were above 50%, and we're getting lower and lower. But, as you said, how much does it actually really show? To be honest, the NI 195 scores are what we think shows, and which, you know, what we sort of go off of to see, you know, is the service we're providing right?
Okay. No, I know where you're coming from. Okay. All right. Councillor Robertson, please.
Great. Yeah, this is a question for Mrs. Shepherd, actually. Recently, we've had stickers on our recycling bins in an attempt to stop people actually putting the wrong stuff in there and contaminating the recycled waste. How long will it be before we can see whether those stickers have had an effect, do you think?
Yes, we're definitely going to monitor it. I mean, we get the contamination figures every month anyway, so within the figures, and actually one of the reasons our recycling rate has fallen was because of actually increased contamination rates, so more of the wrong more material going in the recycling bin, hence the stickers. I would expect in the first quarter to see an impact, because to be honest, it's the first point they see it. You would hope, you know, that it has that immediate impact to people realising that black sacks, you know, nappies, food waste, and whatever the fourth one was, I can't remember, that was on the stickers, which are our main sort of the culprits for causing that contamination, will have that immediate effect. So I would like to see that, you know, in the next quarter, that we can report within the commentary of this report that we have seen an improvement in contamination.
Yeah, okay. Councillor Harper.
In terms of recycling, obviously the amended figures are slightly lower than the previous ones, showing that for the year we recycled 44.77% as opposed to a target of 52.5%. So whilst we're only sort of 10% out, aren't we, basically? With 5% in total, that's 10% below where we want to be. Obviously, I see the arrows are all saying it's an improvement in terms of the comparison to the previous year. But obviously these stickers hopefully will help reduce contamination. But are there any other proactive measures which the council could consider taking which will start to boost our recycling rate even higher than our current target? Because I'm just thinking in terms of, you know, the last council meeting talking about climate emergencies and so on, and the whole issues around, you know, use of resources and so on. If we can recycle a greater proportion of the materials used by residents here, that's all going to help to the greater good in terms of the environment. And 47%, whilst it might be better than some places, still, you know, considerably below where we should be aspiring to achieve. So I just wondered whether the officers have had any thoughts about how we might boost that further.
Okay, I think I know the answer we're going to get back from this, because I've asked it a few times over the last year or so, but Mrs. Shepherd will probably tell you.
First, to just clarify, the figure for the year was 51.4%, so obviously that's for that quarter. So as a whole year, we've recycled 51.4%. And this committee approved the waste strategy, which actually sets our target of 50%. So although we're striving more within the KPIs, what we've set out as a strategy is actually we'll continue to deliver the 50%, which is the national target, and still puts us sort of high up as sort of second in Kent for our recycling figures. But of course, yes, we always want to do more, but we appreciate what we're going to be doing is around the communication rather than any service changes, because the committee didn't support any large-scale service changes at this point, which I think is the right decision, because we're now sort of 4 years off a new contract, which is the point where you would want to make those sort of significant changes. But yes, we'll continue working with the Kent Resource Partnership. So there's some new campaigns coming out through that to try and encourage people to think a little bit more about what can go in their recycling bin. We'll keep pushing obviously the garden waste and the food waste. We've done a lot with food waste and have seen significant improvements in our food waste figures that are being recycled. But also not forgetting that we did commit to is actually waste reduction. So doing as much as we can on love food, hate waste, trying to drive down the waste that's generated in the first place is our priority, almost over actually the recycling element, because if we can stop it being produced in the first place, then that's where we want to be.
I'll just quickly come back on that. I think that's very good, and hopefully those sort of initiatives will start to help. But I just wonder, do we do much work with schools? Because I'm just thinking over the last few years, I mean, especially last year, isn't it? School pupils have been getting very engaged with all of these types of issues. And I just thought if we do work in the primary and secondary schools with children and pupils, they're likely to go home and, you know, be our champions for recycling with their parents, let alone with themselves. I just wondered if we do much engagement with the schools on this.
Okay, thank you. I've got Councillor Burton next, please.
I was just going to say, yes, we definitely do. And actually, we've been really fortunate that Kent County Council have also run a school campaign within some of the schools within Maidstone. So I think with that two-pronged approach, we're definitely doing and trying to get into schools doing different ways, looking at, you know, maybe design technology and things. So it's not the standard we come in and you know, sort of tell them what should, you know, be recycled. It's trying to engage them. You know, we've had our designer dust cart competition in the past, so trying to get it a little bit more interesting. But yes, definitely.
Thank you. Councillor Barton.
I remember fondly the night that we adopted the waste strategy and could have answered that one myself anyway, but you did far better than I would have, I'm sure. My question was a bit of a technical one to do with the way we're going to move these KPIs forward. Specifically, you mentioned obviously the KPI on the number of applications where the prevent duty has ended the application and so on. I'm clear as to how far on we are now since the change of legislation. Are we at a stage of saying we've got 4 quarters of data since the structural changes that you mentioned within the staffing of the housing team have occurred? Have we got that baseline now? You sort of alluded to achieving a baseline for setting the KPIs. Are we there? Are we a quarter short from there? Where are we in those terms?
Thank you. No, and I would explain that in this way. If you think that when the Homelessness Reduction Act came in last April, so April 2018, the reset button was set. So new applicants in April would have had to have worked through 56. So to be honest with you, we won't really know the true position, set a baseline until the end of this financial year. But we can make assumptions probably halfway through the year about what it looks like.
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you. So we're just asked to note the item this evening, members. Is that agreed? Right. Okay, thank you. Thank you very much, Alex. Cheers. Thank you. Okay, we'll move on to item 14, which is on pages 18 to 33. The 4th quarter budget monitoring, and we go over to Chris, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This is the 4th and final budget update to the Communities, Housing and Environment Committee for the 2018-19 financial year. The figures in the report reflect the outturn for the services covered by this committee, although they remain provisional until the completion of the external audit, which actually is due to commence on Thursday. First of all, the revenue position then, which is set out in Appendix 1, is showing a net underspend of £62,000, or to put that in context, 0.71% for the year, compared to a budget of 9.1 million. And that's following the carry forward of 340,000 in unspent grants. In other words, a total variance of 402,000, which is summarised in pages 28 and 29. Significant variances, those that deviate from budget by more than £30,000 or more, are summarised and explained on pages 30 and 31. The most significant variances are positive, including homelessness prevention, which is underspent by 414,000 due to underspends on the home finder and deposit bond schemes, as well as the carry forward of unspent grants of 260,000 into 2019-20. And also grounds maintenance. I'd highlight additional income generated from a range of sources, such as Section 106 agreements, has led to an underspend of 138,000. Of particular note, though, is an adverse variance on recycling collection of 239,000. This is due to a change in accounting policy in the year and which has a one-off impact of 341,000. Previous practice has been to recognise garden waste income on a cash basis, whereby annual subscriptions were accounted for in full in the year in which they were paid, irrespective of specifically when in the financial year they were paid. However, this year there's been a change to an accruals basis whereby income is recognised in the year in which the service is received. So, for example, a subscription that's paid on the 1st of October would be recognised 50% in the current financial year, with 50% of the income deferred to the following financial year. Just to re-emphasise, though, the point on this one, it's a one-off impact and there is no loss of revenue. It's just an accounting issue. The change has been forced on us to a large extent by changing accounting standards effective from 2018-19. Moving on to capital then, the capital programme in Appendix 2, pages 32 and 33, sets out the position. At the year end, 9.196 or 75% of the total budget was spent, and the balance, or slippage as it's known as technically, of 2.994 million rolls forward and is available to complete the projects in 2019-20. The two most significant items are housing incentives. Very little has been spent on this initiative this year, with most of the original budget remaining. The budget, I understand, is being rolled forward primarily to fund the refurbishment of 2 traveller sites in the borough in this financial year. And finally, disabled facilities grants. This is a common one wherever I've been. 43% of the budget has been spent in the year, but that's slightly misleading in the sense that most of the funds, the vast majority of the funds, have actually been committed. There's just a timing delay, if you like, between the grants being approved and the actual drawdown of the funds. So happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Chris. Thank you very much. Do we have any questions, members? No. That's Councillor Rose.
Tell you what, mine's brilliant today. Just on the commercial waste, we've got estimate of 180 there that's not been attributed or not been spent at all. Is that something that's we've budgeted but is going to be planned to be spent in the next financial year, or where does that fall into the plan?
It is committed because we've bought a new dust cart. However, it's a 26-week build on the dust cart, so it was just waiting for its arrival. So it should arrive any day, in which case we'll have to pay the bill. So yes, it's 100% committed.
Okay, right. Lovely, okay. Okay, well, I'll say my piece, if I may. Essentially, when I heard or read that we were going to have £62,000 from the revenue budget of an underspend, I thought, oh, that's handy. We could do something with that, like I generally do at this time of the year. And I've got a proposal I'd like to put towards you, just to put that out there. I've spoken to a number of officers and I've said, look, we've got a bit of extra cash we could possibly use. Oh, and just to make it clear, it will go back to reserves if it's not used. So I've muted a few ideas around officers, and they've said, well, it'll probably cost more than this, or it won't be cost value or whatever from the item. But what I've also done, you're aware, but the Mall is expanding their food court, and it's going to be quite a substantial, item for the town area especially. And within the food court, they're going to be putting public loos. So we've got the loos at the moment down by the bus station. And as you know, we've got a number of issues with the community toilet scheme, and I've been there probably last 3 or 4 years, if not more, where I've been trying to get a public loo in town. And I've spoken to, as I said, one Maidstone and the Mall, and I've spoken to Miss Shepherd tentatively. We've got another meeting on Friday to iron out, get some more detail of what's required. But in essence, they are a little bit short of delivering a really good facility. And the bulk of obviously the expenses will be taken by the Mall. And I'm proposing that we actually go for a changing places toilet. And for those of you not aware of Changing Places Toilet, Changing Places is a charity that campaigns for severely disabled toilets in town centres. We got one in Maidstone at the moment, which is at the YMCA Sports Centre, and there's going to be a new one at the Moat Park Cafe, and the loos there will be extended, and we've got a Changing Places. A Changing Places loo it has a bench in it, it has a hoist, it has masses of space, obviously it has the grab rails, so it is essentially an enhanced disabled loo. But many towns are installing these as a matter of course, and many councils, I've done a bit of Googling, if I can put it like that, many councils are actually paying for them themselves. So they're not partnering up. So we're not in that position, as you know, in Maidstone because of the finances situation, and I don't want to waste money. So with your agreement, I'd like to sort of take this forward. It does have to go to PNR for approval, like most money matters. But I'll just let you know that if plans all go well, the toilets will be open in early 2020. So we're not talking one of these programs where it's going to go on for years or something like that. As I said, PNR, it'll have to go there. It's very positive discussions we've had so far. I'd like your approval, and I'd like somebody to second it, that we move forward this, but I will take questions, if I may, on it, since it's my idea. Councillor Powell.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Sorry, is that okay? I've got that first time. Yeah. So I was surprised, yeah. No, I'm more than happy to second this, and there just isn't enough disabled kind of toilets around generally anywhere. And it's ever since I've been pushing a disabled aunt around that I've realised that. So it's not until you're in that position you actually kind of realise. But have we actually explored all government alternatives as our finance director made approaches anywhere for grants? Because I know there are considerable grants that are available for the usage in public spaces of disabled toilets. Just wondered, not just what you said was fine, and I'm seconding that, but I just need to ask that question.
Okay. Well, I can't answer it. Yeah. But you're talking about the actual grants?
Yeah, the actual grants itself. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm not aware of what the grants do. I mean, Changing Places at the end of the day point people in the right direction. They don't supply, as far as I'm aware, they don't supply any money. But they look at alternatives and they, what's the word? I was going to say, move things forward and point people in the right, facilitate, that's the word. So, yeah.
Well, maybe we could ask the finance director. I mean, obviously, if we agree to that tonight, I mean, that's not down to me as much as I think it is a good idea. But if we can get a retrospective rebate afterwards, it would be very useful. Yeah.
Good point. Yes, yeah, well. Councillor Burton.
Thank you, Chairman. I'll start off by saying it is absolutely laudable, the sentiment behind what you're suggesting, and I think in principle we would all get behind a disabled changing and toilet facility somewhere in our town centre. But I do think there's a little bit of selective remembering going on here, in that it wasn't purely financial reasons that were why, when we looked at this in some detail a year ago in round numbers, we decided against it. There was also concerns over location, ongoing management of the facilities, etc. And whilst I say the sentiment behind this is entirely laudable, and in principle, yes, the idea of putting some support from our underspend behind it is a good one, I do feel it's a little bit blind and potentially irresponsible for us just to commit to that here this evening. Maybe I could see a way where we could potentially have unanimous support for this, because the sentiment, like I say, is utterly laudable. But I think we need to see a little bit more detail, perhaps in a short report, rather than it just being brought to us as a snap decision that we make, because there were considerations beyond just the funding issue that got in the way of this last time we looked at it in detail. Now, if there is a scenario where, because it's going into the MAL within their redevelopment, that they're going to undertake the management of the facility moving forward, then that ticks that box. Clearly, we've ticked the location box. I just think we need those things confirming before we can reasonably give wholehearted support to something.
Yeah, thank you. I totally understand where you're coming from. This is in the back of my mind as well about it. And I'm quite positive that something's going to happen. And I don't want to keep pressing the issue, but it's one of my things that residents regularly say to me. And one of the probably the best things that are kind of come out of this project, one of the priorities, is that the toilets will probably be up. I don't want to put words into people's mouths, but they'll probably be open until 8 o'clock at night because of the food hall will be open later than the shops. So essentially, when the other shops are closing here at 5 or 6, we will have those other couple of hours in the evening. Yeah.
Quickly, I don't believe there was a seconder in the room. Correct me if I'm wrong. Did you say? Okay. I'm not sure whether this is acceptable as an amendment, and I'll take advice on this, but I would like to, if I may, propose an amendment that we actually have a report with some detail to consider this further. Now, that might be a bit of a stretch to consider an amendment. I don't want to, but at the moment I don't think I could support this, because this does feel a little bit blind. We need some detail on, because we might throw 20, 30, 40 grand at this and find out that there's nobody actually offering to manage it going forward. And that would be a travesty and a waste of money, as far as I'm concerned.
Personally, I won't know any more until I've met on a Friday meeting. So I mean, I'm in the same situation. Councillor Pearl.
I'm obviously not going to oppose anything that would improve toilet facilities for disabled people, but on a sort of, dare I sort of sound a bit of a misery guts here, on a point of order, as it were, we really shouldn't be discussing something that's not on the agenda. Para 4.5, Schedule 12, Local Government Act 1972. It should really have been done as a sort of being put on the agenda if this was an item that for discussion.
Councillor Harper.
You actually were in this committee in the budget for 2019-20 was given an extra £10,000, I seem to remember, to undertake a review of public toilet provision in the borough, or I think, I'm not sure if it was the borough or Maidstone town, because it was one of our proposals which was incorporated. And I think the idea we were thinking of was potentially the toilet facilities here being made available to the public during the daytime. They're already here. The building is a public building. But so if you wanted to hang it on anything, Chair, you could hang it around the fact that the council has already requested this committee to look into the expansion of and how you might provide new toilet facilities in the town centre. But I do share Councillor Purdy's point, is that given 62,000 quid to the MAL, we don't know what necessarily their long-term plans are. Obviously, I can understand why they want a food court, because they need to diversify of the empty shop units they've got. But if it was a facility we owned and controlled, I think that's, you know, an argument which in a way is much more straightforward. So, for instance, I know there's a change in place toilet, I think it's been put into the leisure centre at Moat Park, on the freehold belongs to the council. So, you know, there's an investment done by Serco there. I think it's difficult when we're talking with third parties. I think perhaps the thing for you to do is to continue your discussions with them. If you've got a meeting later this week, and perhaps what the committee might wish to consider, because we did a similar thing at Economic Regeneration and Leisure, because you know I always push my luck with committees. And what we agreed there with a similar underspend situation was that I'm going to produce a briefing note for committee members following on from our discussion. So perhaps we might, the easiest way might be to say approve it in principle what you're looking at, have your further meeting this week, produce a briefing note from the chair and the vice chair to the committee members, Because in terms of timing, I'm not quite sure when policy and resources is, but you might well have another meeting prior to their consideration. So if you did something like that, you know, we're saying go ahead, look into it further, but then come back when you've got a detailed proposal precisely on the mechanics, because when we're working with third parties, I just think it's important that we understand what our liabilities, long-term liabilities may or may not be, and how it would be managed. Because, I mean, I completely support the idea that we need more changing places, toilets, I'm sure everybody does here, but it's just when we're working with third parties, we just need to make sure that if we're entering into ultimate negotiations, that we understand our position and any potential liabilities and so on, so we don't fall into any any bad traps. So in good faith, we go 62,000 quid or whatever it is, a grant to provide it. It gets provided, and then they suddenly say, well, actually, this space could be used for a retail unit, and we can get 100,000 quid in the first year, and we've lost the toilet, and we've lost our money.
Okay, thank you for that. Councillor Burton, and then...
I will be very brief. Firstly, just to say, Councillor Harper and others in this room will know that this is something where I've banged my head against a brick wall. For somebody who's only been on this council for a little over 3 years, we've already reviewed public toilet provision in the town centre twice in that short period. So the suggestion of further review is something I do struggle with, because we've drawn the same conclusions for the same reasons twice in one term. Like I say, whilst the sentiment is laudable, we've not found the solution yet. And I also think on your point about bringing briefing notes forward, we're perhaps using different words to say the same thing, and I might suggest that if it is allowable as an amendment, perhaps you could second that and we could move this forward with something coming back to this committee with a bit more detail, because we'd like to hear a bit more about it, but I don't think we're in a position to say, go green light that now, Chairman. Thank you.
No, thank you. And it's good to hear your thoughts. Can I just ask Chris if you could possibly, I don't want to scupper things, could you give me possibly timing? So if we have a series of meetings over the next month, let's put it like this, and it's got to go to P&R, is that money still there for us to it won't drop into reserves and we won't get it back again?
First time. I mean, the decision, as you know, is one for the Policy and Resources Committee. I think the only thing I would say in terms of timing is that the Policy and Resources Committee is considering the outturn for the whole council for the financial year at the meeting on the 26th. And that includes, there's also a further report on the agenda around the spending of the additional funds that were secured as part of the business rates pilot. So there is competition potentially for that budget surplus. That's all I can say really. That's a decision for Policy and Resources.
Okay, so how are we going to move this forward then, folks? Everybody's in agreement, thinks it's a good idea. Yeah. Well, all right, then, will you give me the approval to have further discussions around the subject going forward? Councillor Burton?
If I may, Chairman, I don't think you necessarily actually need our approval to flesh that out. I think you could take it as read that there's support for the principle of what you're saying, some concerns over fleshing out the detail. So if you need a nod from us to go and gather that detail, brilliant.
Okay, thank you. What I'll probably do, I mean, in principle, we support it. Councillor Pat.
Yeah, just one suggestion, Mr. Chair. Could we make, sorry, you talking here. Can we make this quick? Because it's extremely unprofessional if we've got this new centre within the mall and there's people there that can't physically use the toilet because of their disability. We could have one or two things. We could have severe incontinence problems with our resident kind of disabled people, or they just won't turn up. And I think that's a bit unfair on both sides. So let's be quick about this.
Okay. If I'd say that you'll give me the authority, if I say like that, to carry this forward as chair of the committee, and we will go to P&R with a proposal once details are agreed.
I'm sorry to be a stick in the mud about this, Chairman, but the way that that is worded is effectively asking for our approval before the details have been presented to us. That's what I'm struggling with here. There's nothing to suggest when P&R looks at these underspends that certain individual members can't put forward a suggestion for where that money might be spent. But I do think that you will struggle to get, I don't know, maybe I'm speaking out of turn here, but unanimous support for something without any detail to it. That's what I'm struggling with here.
Let's say if I met with the Mal and One Maidstone in the coming weeks, and I said to them, I can get X amount. So, can I tell them I can have 62,000, or can I tell them I can have 5,000?
Chairman, it's not even within the gift of this committee to say that to you, though. It's not within the gift of this committee to say that. We can put our support to something that might be considered by P&R, but we can't say to you it's 30 or it's 40 or it's 50. So,
all right, okay. I just thought I'd try that one. That's all. Okay. Did you want to come in, Councillor Pearl, or are you just disliking my comments? Okay. Right. We'll bring a briefing note back to the committee. Okay. All right. Councillor Harper,
in terms of wording, I think I can help you.
Last one
I've got
on this.
a resolution which was agreed at economic regeneration on a very similar issue to this, and that was that they agreed to give delegated authority to the chairman and the vice chairman of economic regeneration. They should prepare a bid to policy and resources to use the underspend of the Heritage, Culture and Leisure Committee 2018-19. Now that was a unanimous vote of that committee, so potentially, if you use similar wording, you would be following on from a decision made in this room 2 weeks ago.
No, I haven't got any details. So what we'll do, we agree to do the briefing notice, and is everybody happy with that? Yeah. Okay. Thank you, and thank you, Chris, for sorry about the additional parts. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, we're now on to agenda item 15, which is on pages 34 to 50. Tracy Beattie and Martin James.
Point of order, Chairman. Do we not need to actually note the Q4 budget position?
You're so right. I do apologise. Right, going back, I beg your pardon. Agenda item 14, we need to note the recommendations on page 18. Thank you, Councillor Burton. Moving forward to agenda item 15, we have the Environmental Health, I'll say it around the other way now, the Environmental Health and Waste Crime Community Protection Enforcement Policy 2019 from Tracy Beattie and Martin James, please.
Thank you, Chairman, and that's about eight presses for me. Just to sort of introduce the policy, Martin and I have been responsible for writing the policy together. This is really a refresh of our separate enforcement policies, and we have taken this opportunity to combine it into one document. So, and we've included waste crime. This is because there's a lot of synergy between the legislation that we all separately enforce and the processes that are involved within that enforcement process. We also have a duty to update and reflect on any case law that we have experienced, or any developments in guidance at a national level that we take into account. I think that the enforcement policy has been is quite clear, and we've certainly taken into account developments that we have experienced. Martin can sort of go through some of the other elements that we have experienced, and I certainly wouldn't like to preclude him from this discussion. Thank you.
First time. Thank you, Tracy. I think there's not much more I can actually add, and I'm conscious of members' time this evening. As Tracy's already said, we've got shared lineage in some of the teams that are mentioned within the enforcement policy. We use much of the same legislation, and even when some that is bespoke, what we are aiming to achieve is consistent and fair enforcement across all of our legislation, so that the public and our officers have a framework in which to operate. And that was the purpose of bringing the report this evening.
Thank you. Thank you very much. I've got, first of all, Councillor Pearl, please.
And it works first time. Thank you. I thought I read through this, and it's a very comprehensive policy, and it's quite clear as well, despite being comprehensive. I really had one question, and that was in terms of under the heading of shared role and partnership. I understand that the town centre ambassadors from One Maidstone are doing a splendid job at the moment, as they term it, warning and informing people as to the enforcement of the Public Spaces Protection Order. And I was wondering whether we've got an update yet in terms of establishing a memorandum of understanding for One Maidstone and those town centre marshals to enforce that, please.
Yeah, I can come back on that. Yeah, One Maidstone ambassadors have been doing the warning and informing, as you're quite right. A service level agreement has been drafted. It's currently with our legal services team just for approval, but everything's all geared up to do some training, hopefully to have it all in place sort of July, August at the very latest.
Councillor Burton.
Thank you, Chairman. My comments on this would be much the same as the last time Mr. James brought a policy before. Sorry, I understand this one is co-authored, but when we last had it was with your community protection hat on, and I think my comments at the time were something about how wonderful it is to see an accessible document being put together, something that actually explains things out of the jargon for people. So we need a lot more policies like that, and it's really good to see. So thank you to both of you for this. And in that light, I'd like to move the recommendations per the paper for approval, Chairman.
Thank you very much, Councillor Burton. Mrs. Beattie.
Could I just point out that in the recommendation, we've omitted the words waste crime. So could we please include that in the recommendation? So it's just the overall thing.
Is everybody happy with that? Yeah, on there. Yeah, okay, thank you. Right, just to let you know, I had Councillor Burton proposed that. Do I have a seconder for that? Councillor Pearl, okay. Thank you. Okay, members, we need to vote on this one to adopt the actual policy. So those in favour? That's unanimous. Okay, thank you very much. And we move on directly to item 16 on page 51 to 62, where we have the Mid-Kent Environmental Health Annual Report 2018-2019. Over to Mrs. Beattie again.
Thank you, Chairman. This report is an update. It's an annual report, but if members remember or recall, I did bring a similar sort of report to Chi in October. So without wishing to sort of go over the same ground for some of you again, I've tried to sort of encompass the range of work that we deliver for Maidstone Borough Council and give you some of those statistics that we, well, to give you that flavour of the volume and the range. I think that sort of it is reasonably self-explanatory, but I'm open to answering questions that you may have about any of the specific work that we do, and to say that in terms of the next stages or the next steps for this year, we're looking at areas where we can increase our income for particular things which are discretionary. So it could be about giving food hygiene advice, or looking at other aspects for income from giving additional advice for contaminated land reports, for example. We're also looking at developing new courses for businesses to promote and improve their food hygiene rating scores. So it's sort of a slight sort of a variation on the training that we currently provide for the food hygiene courses. Thank you.
Thank you. Right, Councillor Rose.
Hiya. Thanks for this. I'm always really interested in these reports in particular. With the section 2.7, where you're talking about registering businesses for different types of special treatments like tattoos and cosmetic piercing, do you look at all, or do you is anything included within that lip filler treatments? Because it's something in my industry that I'm seeing more and more, and it's something that I get a lot of anecdotal evidence that it's a bit unregulated. Do you have a view on that, or is that included in this piece of work at all?
Specifically, no. But I understand that it can be looked at by the officers when they're actually carrying out inspections. They don't carry out inspections at all the premises that may undertake those sort of interventions or treatments. But I'd like to sort of to explore that more, and we can certainly consider that in the health and safety project work that we're going to undertake this year on special treatment premises. Because what we are doing is we carry out a registration inspection and engagement with the trade, but following that we've got no recourse to go back to those businesses to check on standards unless we have complaints. So yes, it is something we can look at, and perhaps I'd like to explore that with you directly outside of the committee meeting.
Okay, Councillor Kahada, please.
Yeah, that's it. Yeah. Thank you, Chairman. My comment regarding 2.5 section, the displaying the score, where it's really good to see more than 98.5% got the 3 or more. It will be good to see the statistic for those with the 1.5%, which has got a less than 3 scores. What happened to them? What we do? Yeah, what we do. We talk about giving the advice. Maybe there might be some charge for the upgrading or improving their food hygiene, but it might be worth just helping them to achieve the 5 or above. Sorry, 5. It will be good, but more than 3. That's one. Another thing is about the allergen things training. It will be good to see what progress we have made, because that regulation came back in 2014. So we are actually about 5 years behind in terms of seeing a bit more implementations. Just one query in the Appendix 1. Where is the risk rating? Just want to know where you got the risk A, is that low risk or higher risk? Because just looking you got the D and E, but a quite large number of restaurants being affected. It would be good for the member to actually understand where the concerns areas are.
We've got a suite of questions there, so if I've missed something, it's not by intention. You mentioned about the number of premises that have scores of 3 and below, and what we do to make sure, or it's 2 and below actually. 3 is broadly compliant, so that's fine. Where we have businesses which have got a food hygiene rating score of 2 and below, we are concerned about that. Their standards aren't up to scratch. So we actively have a revisit program, so identify in a formal letter to the businesses the work that they need to do to achieve compliance, and then we revisit them within a time frame. So, for example, it may be that they've been asked to replace some defective equipment or flooring, and that isn't necessarily going to be achieved in a week. The business may need to sort of plan that work in and get a contractor in to lay the flooring. So it may be something they need to negotiate with the officer over. So it could be a week or 2 weeks. We also have a process where they can appeal against the risk rating they've been given. So if they disagree with the score that the officer has given them, the food team leaders from both teams get together and look at the evidence provided by the food business operator and the information in the letter that's been provided by the officer. They then carry out a forensic assessment of that information against something called the brand standard, which is produced by the Food Standards Agency. I believe that that process is very robust and very fair to the businesses. The businesses also have an opportunity to pay for a re-rating inspection, which is undertaken within a certain time frame. And again, there is no guarantee that the score will go up. So it's sort of terms and conditions apply. But again, it is fair and a robust system. So I think that we try and support, engage with businesses at a number of levels, and it's not just a cut-off and that's it. We do have lots of engagement and support for businesses. In the context of Appendix 1 and Table 1, I think it's Table 1, yeah, interventions by risk rating. Now here, a premises which is rated A is the highest risk. So that's where we feel that there is a significant risk to the public, and those businesses are subject to 2 inspections per year, which is why we've only got 4 premises, or 2 premises, that's 4 interventions that occurred during the last year. So the majority, where we want the majority of businesses to be, is in category C and D. So that would be a food business such as a restaurant or a caterer. Category E premises are reasonably low risk premises, so they may be a retailer selling food which is only wrapped. They're not actually handling open food at that premises. And just for sort of completeness, unrated premises are generally new businesses, ones that haven't had previous risk ratings. And in total, you can see there that officers carried out over 1,000 interventions during the year, which is, if you put that into context with the previous agenda item, we carried out sort of over 1,000 interventions, but we actually only served 3 improvement notices in Maidstone for food hygiene reasons.
Okay, that's everything covered for you, Councillor? Yeah. Yep. Okay, Councillor Powell.
Thank you, Chair. Just to spin off from the previous question, given that the premises rating A could be deemed as a danger to the public, should they not just be struck off and shut down until they can prove something, until they can put those necessary changes into place, rather than to continue trading and be a risk to the public?
If officers inspected and felt that there was an imminent risk to public health, they would serve an emergency hygiene prohibition notice. So it's very clear what the grounds for those. And it isn't a step which we would take lightly. We would consider, for example, it would be a pest infestation of such a degree that the business owner hadn't engaged with a pest company. There were flagrant breaches. Perhaps they, and these are examples that we have experienced where they've got sort of like the manhole cover off a waste pipe, and there's sort of, there's in a food room. So they're very significant risks to the public.
That's lovely. Thank you very much. So, members, is that everybody? Okay, lovely. Right, we're just asked to note, actually, the contents of the report. So, is everybody agreed on that? Okay, lovely. Thank you. So, we'll move on to agenda item 17. Thank you, Mrs. Beattie. Thank you, Martin. Heather House and Pavilion Building. We eventually got there, members of the public. And, okay, we're going to ask Mr. Connors to present this for us, please.
There we go. 8 clicks. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The committee will be aware of the previous reports regarding Heather House. There's been a previous report on the condition survey results back in October 2018. A subsequent report on a feasibility study which looked at the redevelopment potential of Heather House and the Pavilion building site. That was back in December 2018. The report on the feasibility study demonstrated a comprehensive redevelopment of Heather House to provide a new multi-use community centre cannot be delivered without significant subsidy, and it was reported at the time that it was in excess of £2 million, as the income from residential housing that would be built on the Pavilion building site would not be sufficient to cross-subsidise the development as a whole and the delivery of a new multi-use community facility. So it's approved that a procurement process be undertaken to identify suitable partners or partners that would contribute towards the design, investment and management of a new facility. This report outlines the findings from the procurement process that's been undertaken. And the report also includes the consultation results of the resident and stakeholder surveys that have been carried out, previously reported to this committee, as well as the information regarding the petition previously presented to the committee regarding the future of Heather House. With respect to the procurement process, there was a prior information notice which was advertised on the Kent Business Portal on 23rd of January 2019 and also distributed via an e-newsletter to voluntary and community group contacts. And it was also directly emailed to community groups who had already expressed an initial interest in the project. The final responses were received on the 14th of March 2019, and the PIN used is attached to Appendix 1 within the report. And this invited responses to a set number of questions. We had a total of 12 responses that were received as a result of the procurement exercise. Of the 12 respondents, 5 responded by saying they'd be interested in participating in the project. There were 3 that indicated they will be willing to manage and steward a new or improved facility. None of the respondents, though, could commit directly to contributing monies to fully or part fund a new or improved facility, but 4 could actually assist with support for fundraising bids. And 1 respondent was happy to act as a facilitator and a project enabler to help find partners to contribute towards the design and finance via their network hub. Only a small number of respondents to the resident survey that's been previously reported to the committee actually visit and make use of Heather House, but what was interesting to note is that the most common reasons why was because they were unaware of it, not aware of the clubs and activities, and they were new to the area. So I feel that which more promotion and publicity of the facility to the local community would no doubt help raise an interest in hiring and making use of it going forward. It's clear that there's some value placed on the community centre and what it offers to Parkwood and the local community, particularly with the existing stakeholders who regard the facility as very important and a valuable resource to them. It's therefore viewed that the potential loss of a community centre could pose a significant and negative impact on existing users and the surrounding neighbourhood. As the procurement exercise hasn't identified any potential partners who could directly contribute any capital investment to fully or part fund a new or improved facility, it's recommended that the best and less risky option would be for the council to pursue a refurbishment and extension of the existing facility, which has an indicative cost referred to in the report of 1.1 million. Also, that the council pursue a redevelopment of the pavilion building site for residential housing, and that the indicative land receipt of 500,000 that's been referred to in the report could be generated, could go towards the refurbishment and extension costs to Heather House, which would reduce the reliance on council funding for this element to 600,000 using these indicative costs. The extension to Heather House could provide changing room facilities and cater for the needs of the rugby club, who operate from the pavilion building at present. And it's important to note also as well that there's been an update regarding the Royal British Legion Sports and Social Club, who have notified the council that it will cease trading, will be surrendering their lease and vacating the pavilion building very soon, which simplifies any redevelopment proposals for this part of the site. The pavilion building site is considered acceptable in principle for residential redevelopment and has been submitted as part of the call for sites process and review of the adopted local plan. The future management of Heather House, that needs to be obviously carefully considered also, and the council can continue discussions with those organisations who have expressed an interest to undertake the future management and stewardship of the Heather House facility. Should the council approve the recommendation within the report, a further report will be presented to Policy and Resources Committee in due course to consider the business case for Maidstone Property Holdings to develop the pavilion building site and approve the final scheme costs and necessary financial commitments associated with the development and management of both of the schemes. Happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Mr. Collins. That's a good presentation on a very big subject, if I can put it like that, and a lot of discussion that's gone on prior to that. Okay, I've got Councillor Burton first, please.
Thank you, Chairman, and thank you to the ever-present members of the public who have turned out yet again this evening. I'll start off with an apology to you and a plea to the Chairman that if this does come back again, as I asked last time, could we maybe shift it up the agenda for the good people who do turn out to come and listen to this. I will try to avoid treading over old ground because for those of you who have been on the committee for previous years, we've talked this to death and I've rambled on quite a lot about it. I think we're actually in a position to be able to make quite a good and positive decision here tonight, which was something that at various points along exploring the routes for what we could do at Heather House hasn't always looked likely. We started with a truly above and beyond ambitious proposal and scheme for a multi-million pound redevelopment of an all singing, all dancing community centre, we finally went out to other third-party organisations and asked if anyone would support us in achieving that, and the silence was unfortunately deafening. So, whilst we have not achieved option A, we have a very good middle ground suggestion here for a thorough refurbishment that will secure the future of Heather House, which is what we have sought from the very beginning as members for Parkwood Ward sat here. We also have the suggestion that we may even have an extension of the building to provide the continued changing facilities that will be lost at the Pavilion building. We have a proposal for the manner in which that may be funded, and we will, subject to that going forward at this committee tonight, be going cap in hand to Policy and Resources Committee, and I urge anybody who votes for this proposal this evening, proposal that I am about to make, that they turn up at Policy and Resources Committee with caps in their hands to make that plea. If you are giving your commitment to this evening, put something behind that and come to Policy and Resources and speak for it that evening as well. I have two very quick questions, and then I will make a proposal. So if you wouldn't mind coming back to me, Chairman, that would be much appreciated. I'd like a little bit more detail on the format of the community engagement for the design process that's set out or alluded to in 1.45. I think it would be interesting for those, we have some interested parties who would like to know how they can have some input into what the design of this refurbed building will look like. And secondly, I would like to know what the timescale will be for reporting this to PNR in rough numbers. Will that occur before we have a final design, before community engagement on a broad business principle, or will that occur after this community engagement when we have a final design and when we have everything sewn up? And if so, how long do we anticipate that taking?
Not before the male toilets, though. Yes, sorry. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah. In terms of the community engagement, I envisage that we would go out to obviously consult the local community, the existing stakeholders, in terms of any design proposals for the refurbishment to Heather House, and that would happen when we've actually appointed the architect, employees agent, the consultancy team, once we work through some design options, etc. and stuff, and we know what the actual refurb is required on, obviously through the condition survey on Heather House. Then we'll work up some design options and then obviously present them to the existing stakeholders and the wider community and stuff and all that. There might be some form of like presentation or informative event and stuff that we hold actually in Heather House and so forth, and that where we can present kind of like drawings, etc. and stuff and that to them. In terms of like timescales, I think I've referred to 18 months in the actual report in terms of the working up a kind of like a scheme, getting the consultants on board, actually taking it through planning, etc. But I think we can actually shave quite a few months off that. So I would say 12 months is more, it could be realistic in terms of that. And we would obviously be doing that community engagement, etc. and stuff at a time when we're going through the design process so we can help fix it, obviously then prior to us going through the planning process.
Okay, thank you for that. Mr. Connell, beg your pardon.
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. Just to add to what my colleague said there, I think we do have a bit of an opportunity here in as much we've kind of decoupled the two sites. Although we always want to keep them linked to some degree, we can get on quickly, I think, and take the matter to Policy and Resources Committee in terms of a decision to get on and develop the British Legion site with on the understanding that any sort of land value that is created gets sort of allocated to Heather House at such time as it comes forward. And then, as part of that exercise, we've got to sort of make the case, I would say, yourselves as the committee members to the Policy and Resources Committee that on top of that money, there's a further £600,000 that is going to be needed. And, you know, could that come from allocation within the next capital programme, or could there be an opportunity to get some of the funding through the business rates retention pilot fund? So there are different things, but I think what we can do is get on with the housing and development approval, and you know, once that starts to take shape, bring Heather House along through this committee.
Thank you for that. Do you want to come back on that? Yeah.
If I may, please. So we've hit on the crux of my only major concern that still exists with this. And whilst I understand the need to pursue the bit that makes the money to enable what we really want to achieve as quickly as possible, I do think that we need, I'm going to propose an amendment, the words to which I have scribbled somewhere, to sort of tighten up what I believe it needs to be a tighter link between the two sites in the recommendation that we have in front of us here. So I'd like to propose an amendment such that the recommendations on the paper read that the committee endorses that a follow-up report is presented to Policy and Resources Committee to consider the business case for Maidstone Property Holdings Limited to develop the pavilion building site for residential housing in order to partially fund a redevelopment of Heather House, and then the rest reads as per the papers. So there's just that small excerpt in there that I believe actually ties these together far better. Otherwise, I think if you were coming to this with fresh eyes, not having followed the way that this has developed over the last over 18 months now, you could be forgiven for thinking that we were, in this recommendation, approving some building of some flats, or when we might do something with a community centre next to it, and that is certainly not the sentiment that I want anyone leaving this room with. If you need, do you need those words again? Yes, I mean, I don't know whether we want to tighten that again in terms of saying as per the plans and business case that may be presented. I don't, maybe that doesn't need anything further than that, but it just needs some wording to tie that much more closely to this enables the redevelopment or refurbishment of Heather House in order to keep it open, not quite in perpetuity because nothing lasts forever, but for a much longer time than it would currently be standing. So I don't know if I have a seconder in the room for that amendment. That's good. That's good.
Okay, I've got some other members want to have a...
Absolutely, yeah.
Right. Thank you. Thank you. Councillor Powell.
Sorry, Councillor Rose beat me to that. I'd obviously like to second that. But this item this evening was all about Heather House, what we're going to do with Heather House. We've been talking about it forever. In fact, the talk that you gave earlier was excellent. We've had all this before, the surveys, and we've questioned surveys, etc. But this is all about the redevelopment of Heather House. And I must say that the Royal British Legion, as much as it's important to everything else, it is secondary. Heather House must come first.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Harper.
I think the amendment makes eminent sense on this, because if you allow any wriggle room, a slight change in emphasis means that we go ahead and we develop the British Legion building for flats or whatever, and then, oh dear, how are we going to find £1 million odd for Heather House? So we need to make sure that it's really watertight. So if Policy and Resources recommend, obviously, to include the pavilion building for housing, that's sort of really heavily caveated that any proceeds, net proceeds, have to go to this project, because there's every danger as time goes on, other priorities will come up, and Heather House, whilst it's, you know, it's obviously incredibly important, will suddenly be seen as a secondary thing, and we'll have sold the thing, and then we'll never get anywhere. So, I mean, that makes really good sense. Obviously, I've not been subject in these debates previously on the thing, but just reading it, it's a sad indictment to some extent of Maidstone Council. In particular, the option which we're all, I imagine, going to support tonight, whilst it safeguards Heather House for 15 years, and that's what it does, because it's a 15-year refurbishment. And so in 13 years' time, our successors will be sitting here with precisely the same issues which have been confronted this committee for the last couple of years over what do we do if a building coming to the end of its economic life, and hey-ho, all the same issues will go around, and short of the community in Parkwood having had a radical transformation, the demands will still be there. So I think we just, you know, whilst this is really good that we get something done, we safeguard it for 15 years. Let's not be blasé that in 13 years this problem is going to come straight back to us. And it might be that, you know, obviously to do the thing properly was this £2 million, which clearly the council's constrained on. But, you know, and that for me highlights a problem which has been raised at the Old Heritage, Culture and Leisure Committee about the council's attitude to looking after its buildings. Okay, so we own quite a lot of buildings such as Heather House, the one we're sitting in, the museum, pavilions, a depot, and all the rest of it, all around the borough. And at HCL, we were trying for a long time, and I'm going to write to the Chief Executive to ask for a briefing note on the council's approach to maintenance of its estate. Because if we had, and I've worked in the property business in various roles previously, you have what's called planned preventative maintenance and reactive maintenance. Well, what I see at Maidstone is a lot of reactive maintenance, but clearly not much planned preventative maintenance. Because if you had a planned preventative maintenance programme, we would never have got to this position. The building would always have been kept in good condition, and so its economic life would always have been considerably beyond the horizons to which we're looking at. And something's wrong in the way we look after these buildings. I mean, it's...
That's fantastic, yeah.
But
okay.
The point, the thing is, this is really important, because this building here, the scaffolding's gone up because myself and other councillors point out the buddleia growing in the drain pipes. And hey-ho, 3 months later, scaffolding appears. You wonder whether that would happen, you know. We are not we don't seem to look after our estate in the way we do. And as I say, whilst I fully support this, because Heather House is a really important facility for that part of the borough, I'm just concerned on what happens in 13 years' time, you know, when, hey-ho, it was done for 15 years by your predecessors in 2019. We need, you know, in supporting this, I do think we should be thinking about the longer term for this site as well, because I'm concerned. I mean, we've got two of our youngest councillors over there who might be here in 13 years' time to be addressing this problem.
Right. Thank you, Councillor Harper. Thank you very much. I'm going to bring Mr. Cornell in at the moment, please.
Thank you, Chairman. Yeah, just on that point, it is worth considering that my colleague Mark Green did commission a full asset review, which was presented to the Policy and Resources Committee, that looked at all the council's assets across the board, and in terms of where there was the opportunity to rationalise, redevelop, so on, to generate funds for reinvestment in the portfolio. So I think, you know, some of the issues we're wrestling with tonight are a little bit of a case of, you know, where you know, difficult decisions haven't been confronted in the past. So I take the point, but I think we have all got to learn from that and continue to look at our assets strategically, else the resources won't always be there when we need them to reinvest in the ones that we consider the priorities.
Yeah, thank you. I personally, I totally agree with that, because I'm on PNR as well. I've got right, I've lost a little bit of track. I've got Councillor Rose next, please.
Thanks very much. Just first of all, thank you again for the guys that show up time after time whenever we talk about this. In all the time I've been on this committee, I've never known another topic that people have constantly come out for, and I think it's a real indicator for us how important it is when we don't see anything else that people have consistently shown up and given their support for. So thanks very much for that, guys, and sorry again that it's right at the end of the agenda. We are working on that. My main question, though, obviously the funding for this is going to be the big issue. Obviously, we've got a rationalised figure of £984,148. And obviously in your report you've kind of summed that up to 1.1 million. Can you give me some rationale around kind of the jump on that? I fully understand where the 984 figure comes from, but where's the sort of rounding up come in?
At some project on costs and stuff and all that, so there's consultant fees and other things and stuff and like that's on top of that, so there's a kind of a 10% margin that's been added effectively onto that.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, I just think that this is gonna kind of rise or not based on the numbers, and I guess the more kind of accurate numbers we can give to PNR, I think the more likelihood we're gonna have for it.
Are you Councillor Young? Keep going. Keep going.
Oh, hooray, hooray. Yes, thank you, Chairman. Perhaps a naive question, I don't know, I'm new to all this. Why can't both of these buildings be built at the same time, using the same contractor?
We'll ask Mr. Connors that question.
Sorry?
It's okay.
That they could be, and it is actually alluded to in the report, that for economies of scale, etc. and stuff and all that, to get one contractor to do kind of like both projects. I mean, it is something that we can kind of look at, and we have done it on other schemes, so.
May I just add to that, because you were alluding to the fact that you'd actually demolish the pavilion first and build that first before you carried on and did Heather House. Would there be a gap between the building of the new development and Heather House? I mean, you've all just said that Heather House is the most important thing on this agenda. This item is so important that it strikes me that that should be the focus, not the building of the flats. I mean, I do understand that you need the revenue from the flats to subsidise Heather House, but it just seems to be the cart before the horse.
Mr. Connell will answer that question for you.
Thank you. Yeah. Obviously, if we were doing a new build element, a new build of Heather House, it would make more sense to have a single contractor. But really, if it's a refurbishment, you'll be looking at more of a fit-out specialist contractor for Heather House. And for an apartment block, obviously, you're into a sort of concrete frame, and it's a different kind of specialism. But also, you know, what the report is highlighting here is that Heather House, in order to get the Heather House project underway, you're sort of beholden to Policy and Resources releasing the monies that are required. So it could be that we can crack on with the apartment scheme first of all, and at whatever point the monies are to hand for the refurbishment of Heather House, and then we can press go on that. So I think it kind of decoupling them is probably going to be simpler.
Thank you for that. Councillor Pearl, please.
Thank you, Chairman. I have to commend this report because I think it's now, you know, it finally sort of looks like there's a sort of clearer route, I think, in order to achieving what we all want to achieve, which is keeping Heather House open and viable, and indeed, you know, keeping it as a sort of, ensuring that the sort of building itself is safe, for example, and so forth. This is another report in a series of reports from Mr. Connell's areas, which are sort of sobering but comprehensive and well written. And I personally, and you know I'm going to say this, I'm particularly impressed by paragraph 141, where you discuss the call for sites and the pavilion building pavilion site being put forward in the Quarter site, because there was me thinking that we were all told at that Policy and Resources Committee meeting of 22nd of March that that was exempt information and it was all to be kept top secret. I'm pleased that this is that you've got this detail in here, and that we're discussing the the pavilion in tandem with discussing Heather House, because it allows us just to sort of emphasise the extent to which, as Councillor Powell put it, the priority is Heather House. If this building is to take place at the pavilion, it is a means to an end. It is so that we can keep Heather House open, please. And I am alive to this risk, and I think that is what Councillor Burton was touching on. That maybe the flats get built on the pavilion and then Heather House doesn't get refurbished, and that's the thing which I really think we all want to guard against.
Okay, thank you very much. Right, are we happy with the recommendation as per amended? Would you like it read out, folks? Councillor Burton. Is that okay?
Okay. That the committee endorses that a follow-up report is presented to Policy and Resources Committee to consider the business case for Maidstone Property Holdings Limited to develop the pavilion building site for residential housing in order to partially fund a refurbishment of Heather House, and to approve the final scheme costs and necessary financial commitments associated with the development and management of the Heather House and pavilion building sites, subject to the necessary planning consent and tenders for the works contracts being received for both schemes.
Okay, I'll propose that from the chair. I need
Order, Chairman. We've had a proposal and a seconder for an amendment, which we need to
You're
vote
right.
on.
We were doing the amendment. I was thinking it any other way. That's fine. Okay. So we need a vote on this as it was just been read out. Okay. Those in favour? And that's unanimous. Thank you.
And now, Chairman, if I may, we also then need to vote on the substantive motion. We've had the motion amended. Yeah.
Right. Right, okay then. So we vote again on the substantive motion. Okay, thank you. Councillor Robertson, have you? Right, those four.
So, yeah.
All right? Don't complicate it, yeah. Right, a substantive motion, those four, that's unanimous. Thank you very much. Right, moving on to agenda item 18, with the urgent item on page 101. And it's Mr. Connell's going to present this for. Oh, it's Jen. Sorry, yeah, sorry. Right. Thank you, John. Thank you, John.
So, councillors, I'll be as quick as possible. I think this is relatively straightforward. So, back in November, Councillor Powell raised an issue to the committee regarding graffiti in a couple of hotspots, St Peter Street and Buckland Hill. And with nice engagement with the two private companies, we didn't get an awful lot of success. So it was quite clear that we needed a procedure in place what had a little bit of teeth into it, that we could actually force these companies to clean up the graffiti on their property. Well, we must stipulate we don't have a massive problem in Maidstone, but these two locations are definitely problematic, and there's probably a couple more around in our town centre as well. So as ever, we always want to take a proactive approach to anything operational. So on Appendix 1, you will see the graffiti enforcement process, which uses community protection warnings and notices. Well, actually, if we go through that process, we will first off go with a low-level awareness letter, as will be sent out. I'm sorry if I'm skipping through somewhat. We must also state to private any private residents that we can remove graffiti, we do provide that service free of charge. It's when it becomes the large commercial companies or anything that needs a bit of specialised equipment that we don't have the budget to clean. We say we have a graffiti removal team in our town centre and around the borough that will systematically go around the borough and clear graffiti. So the proposal is this process to be accepted, that if we do not get any action from a low-level letter, we will then send a community protection warden to the landowner and give them a set period of time to act. If not, then a CPN, and then we will then issue fines, and then we put in that process enforcement actions, but it's going to be more than likely that we would do the works in default. So we'd actually do the works ourselves and recoup the money from that private landowner. And of course we can go down there and actually get monies, recover the costs through prosecutions if need be. It's a heavy-handed attack, and I fairly believe that the first 3 to 4 stages in that process will eradicate most of these problems. Again, I think I might have highlighted we've only had 72 reports of graffiti in our borough in the year, and which 42 of those reports have been in the town centre, and it's fair to say the majority of those are those 2 locations that I mentioned earlier. So it's not a sledgehammer to crack a walnut, but it is something that we can rest upon those ongoing problems that we have. And just to briefly say, train stations are predominantly heavy for graffiti in any council in the borough, and also schools, especially if there's an art college around. They particularly want to show their artwork on utility boxes as well. So it's nothing revolutionary there. I've spoken to some counterparts in more London boroughs, and they believe this is the process they use. There is other powers we have under the Antisocial Behaviour Act, such as graffiti removal notices and some very complicated stuff about town city planning acts. But for us, CPNs is the simplest. We're used to using them. They have a very high success rate for us. There's a whole load of paragraphs I can tell you why I believe it's so, but it's the simplest way, and it's something that we can do within the resources that we have already. We would use our waste crime team to help issue these CPNs, and this kind of work is second nature to them. Sorry if I rabbited on a little bit, but I know it's very late, and it's the last agenda on the event. And also, Alex is no longer here, but there is a recommendation that we should use a KPI for our graffiti, which has come on that ones afterwards. So maybe whatever's decided on this one, then we can decide upon this one as well. So sorry if I rabbited on a little bit quickly there, but power through.
Okay, I'm going to let Councillor Pearl have a go first of all, please, and then your names on the report, and then we'll go over to Councillor Powell.
I'll try and keep it brief. I should say I'm extremely grateful for this report, if only because I know that it's fallen on the person who we all send our service requests to whenever we want anything cleared up in this town, and I'm grateful that you've found the time to put this together. And I'm also very grateful for the recommendation, and I think the graduated approach you're proposing is exactly the way forward. On a point of information, because I'm a pedant, graffiti removal notices were in the 2003 Antisocial Behaviour Act. That was obviously repealed by the 2014 Act, so that's not actually an extant power anymore. What I was going to say is two other points. My original agenda item request of 5th of November last year, I did also raise a matter aside from graffiti in terms of the antisocial nature of Network Rail, and that was trees overhanging my residence in Leslie Place being a nuisance. And I think we've kind of sort of, by focusing on obviously the key issue here, that particular issue unfortunately does appear to have gone aside, and maybe if we could have a conversation sort of offline about that. My other point, though, I was going to say is when we discussed this in November, Councillor Newton, who clearly understands young people better than I do, pointed out that it was clearly a small number of familiar tags that were being repeated everywhere, and suggested that there was therefore a sort of small hardcore of people who were actually causing a great deal of damage across the borough, and sort of suggest that maybe something ought to be done about that. Now, I did notice at the weekend, and it's obviously collateral to the report and recommendation, but I did notice at the weekend that Canterbury is now offering 500 quid a pop for information leading to the identification of taggers. And I don't know if that's sort of something that maybe the council could consider sort of going forward. Yeah, I'll wrap up because I know that it's getting late. But just to reiterate, saying again, thank you for the report and thank you for the recommendation.
Okay, Mr. Edwards, would you like to come back on any points there at all? But you're all noted, okay. Councillor Powell.
So I think Councillor Pell's mentioned most of it. I quite like the idea of the fines, but then I tend to be zero tolerance in these areas. It's just my nasty nature. Has anybody ever been caught for this? Because some of these pieces are absolute works of art. It must take them ages to do it, and surely someone sees them do it and reports them, yeah. Because it's going to be the same people, as Councillor Newton said back in November, that are probably doing all of this work. But it might be an adult, who knows, it's not just kids, but it's... But I know Councillor Newton has all these statues kind of sprayed over, so he's obviously got a vested interest in that. But I just wondered, do we actually catch these people?
You call them works of art, I call them something else. No, we haven't. Swell have caught a couple. The problem there is, these are always, pretty much always done by groups. If you become a bit of a keen eye for them, if you travel up to London, you'll see the same tags all along the way route. So, you know, there is some organisations out there who are quite unpleasant, but they call themselves by little tags. We know who the groups are, but of course, finding those individuals, and they do these things late at night. But please, if we did ever catch someone, we would throw as much at it as possible. But no, we haven't caught anyone, unfortunately.
Okay, thank you very much. That's all, folks. The recommendations are on page 101. And we'll take these as a whole, including the urgent update. Yep, is that okay, all three? Number one, those four? That's unanimous. Oh, I beg your pardon, hang on, folks, sorry.
Yeah, that's been suggested as a block.
No. Shall I?
Right, a committee decision here. We've got to choose one. Suggested recommendations as bullet pointed on the urgent update. So you've got the percentage of land and highways acceptable levels of graffiti, national indicator 195C methodology, percentage of reports of, second one is percentage of reports of graffiti incidences responded to within X amount of days, or percentage of graffiti incidents removed within X amount of days.
If I could just put a recommendation, if I may, the first one for me wouldn't provide a very knowledgeable figure. The percentage would be so low. It would be 0.1, 0.2s. For me, the second one is, and I think that's how you could judge our service, that once we do receive that report, then we, and including the enforcement, I think that's a better one that we could be judged across. Not to take your views, but that's my recommendation.
Yep. Okay then, members, we're going to vote on this now. So it's the two recommendations plus number 2 on the urgent update on the list. Are those 4? Oh.
On what's the difference between on that suggested KPIs between the second one and the last one? Because I thought to me the last one seemed the most easy thing. Percentage of graffiti instances removed within X days. And presumably X days is obviously from when they've been reported to us. So that would tell us if we're getting them done within, I don't know, 5, 10, 15 days or whatever.
Yeah. Because the removal could be delayed for enforcement action, finding landowners, and whether so things, if you like, as quickly as we can work, will be judged on factors outside of our control in some instances. And again, we must say we haven't got a huge problem in Maidstone. So,
can I just add, the second one includes what you've just you're looking at agreeing. The last one, if it's on private land and we're not removing it, it wouldn't be there. Whereas the second one, it's responded to. That could be enforcement action or it could be removal. It captures everything.
Yeah. Okay. Right. Councillor Burton, that's the last member I'm going to take now. So Councillor Burton is next, and that's final.
One quick question. Quite agree that that's the best way to measure the policy that we're agreeing this evening, so I'm more than happy to give my support to it. I'm just wondering at what point, at which threshold we're considering it responded to. Is it the first tier on that 8-tier progression that is marked out in the report? What do we count as responded to?
So responded to is when officers gone out, engaged with the landowner or engaged with our own workforce and carried out a form of work. And I would again suggest that that'll be 2 working days.
Perfect, thank you.
Okay, so that's recommendations as per the papers plus the urgent update bullet point number 2. Okay, those 4? That's unanimous. Thank you very much, members. That closes the meeting. Thank you.